So
Well, I'm a little disappointed, Dave. 10 out of 10, I would have bet you were about to quote Full Metal Jacket in some shape or form right there, but I'll accept that as an answer
yeah.
anyway. Colton, favorite words of wisdom.
This is a old quote I heard my freshman year at college, and it was to avoid criticism, say nothing, do nothing, be nothing. And it's so simple.
Yeah.
And a lot of times people right now are focused on being nice and not ruffling feathers, and you know, and and people think that that's being nice, and I think it's one of the most cruelest things you can do, right, is to just have yes men in your life that are constantly like, yeah, you're on the right track, and just kind of appeasing whatever thought, whatever action that you're up to. And I think that goes with men having their own inner circle, or with your spouse, or with a parent. Like, you need to tell people what actually needs to be said, not just what you think their feelings want to be pandered to. Because I think that's absolutely staggeringly cruel. If you know that you need to say something else and you don't, it's like, do you actually like that person? Because if I didn't like that person, I might tell them what they want to hear, because they'll just continue down that path and it'll lead them to a terrible place. And so I think it's just do the right thing. And that whole, to avoid criticism, say nothing, do nothing, be nothing, has been something that's always stuck with me, of like kind of a little guiding force on, do
I
I need to
like
say,
that.
and it's like David said, he's like, don't be an asshole about it. Right. And sometimes when you're trying to figure out that balance, sometimes you are an ass, and it's like, yeah, that may not have been the intention, but then you just learn from it, and don't be an asshole next time. But go at it. The thing I've tried to focus on recently is to build bridges, not barriers. And it's a bit of a balancing act when you're talking about controversial issues, is to not burn bridges while also taking on those controversial issues. So that's something I've been trying to figure out here recently, with a lot of this stuff. But it's if you just want to be another fly on the wall and not do anything and not contribute, don't say anything, don't do anything. Just exist, suck up some oxygen, do your time on earth, and go on. But it's like, man, I think God put us all here with a purpose. And when there's this, I don't know if you guys know a guy named by Ed Milet. He has a pretty big podcast, and I've listened to his stuff, and he shares this kind of potential vision, per se, that's like, hey, when I die, and it's kind of like a make believe scenario, but he's like, if I die and I go to heaven, and I meet God, and God says, Ed or Colton or David or Daniel, he's like, before you go in, I'd like to introduce you to the man that I created you to be. And he introduces you to yourself at the fullest potential of what he set you out to do here on earth. And when I heard that kind of visualization of, man, what if that were to happen, if I was to die and go to heaven and to be introduced to the man that I was meant to be, I don't want to be a stranger to that person. And that means that every day I've got to take the actions to do what I was actually put here on earth to do, regardless if it's comfortable or not, right? To do what actually needs to be done. And so that whole thing means that for me, I can't avoid criticism, right? If I want to avoid criticism, I'm just going to stay comfortable. I'm going to avoid all the things that I might actually be on earth here to do. And I think all of us have our own avenue. I mean, David, you're in a very unique area of the industry, and so it's interesting. Like, so that's just kind of like how I've structured those two, that quote, and then the little potential, at the end of the game, per se, to keep me pushing towards who I'm my fullest potential. Because that's I don't have fears, but like I don't want to miss the mark on living up to the fullest potential that I was put here to do. So
That's
yeah.
great. Yeah, I have an interesting dynamic for me on that vein of not, not saying what's on your mind. I have a little bit of a mouth vomit problem. So I don't have the hold back in me that keeps me from saying what I believe. And that is, it's hurt me in ways with people because most people can't handle that. Or a lot of people can't handle it, or they look at it like it's not PC, or it's not the right thing to do, or you're not gonna be able to get through with DC or whatever. Because I've been by some pretty big players in the quarter horse world that were in positions of authority that have made this mantra that I'm too redneck for DC. Because and when they say that, it's because I'm too forward. I don't dance around a subject, and I call people out. I don't care what side of the aisle they're on. If they're in the wrong, I'm going to call them out. I'm going to tell them what they're doing and why they need to not be in that scenario, in my view. So yeah, it's only Dave Duquette's view, but it's not, it's my view, and I'm going to say it. I'm not going to dance around it for the most part. I've tempered that some, but the interesting part is during some of the meetings at AQHA, there's people that said, well, Dave's too redneck for DC. Well, I got defended by one of those members. He stood up and he went on about things that I forgot I've done, that I tell him about. And he rattled off all this stuff that I've done in DC. And he goes, well, what have you guys done? What is this person? What's our lobbyist done? Well, tell me all the things. And he goes, I think maybe we need a little more redneck in DC. And that's, for me, I can go to the halls of Congress and walk around, and staffers and people in the hallways know who I am. And they come up and talk to me. But it's because I am so open with my feelings, and they appreciate that. They know that about me. They know if I go into a meeting that they're gonna get a truth bomb and something's gonna come out. So I don't have to worry about that stuff anymore. I go, do I try to temper it, not be an asshole or not come across an asshole? Hell yeah, I do. But when I first started going to DC, I was naive enough to believe that if I went in and showed everybody proof of what I was saying was true, that we could change the world, right? We could just change everything. Well, I was pretty naive, because you go into DC and it doesn't matter how much proof you have. If you don't know the right protocol or the right people, you have a hard time. That's the swamp. That's part of the swamp. You have to know you're either greasing the skids or you're doing whatever to get that done. I've never operated that way. We were able to effectively do things, especially when I started working for Forrest Lucas. I'd been doing this stuff for 5 years before then. But with Forrest Lucas behind me, it was a little different dynamic when I walked in the room, and Forrest was right there with me, or people knew I was Forrest guy, so that was that helped me out a bunch. But now I have a reputation to be able to get things accomplished. So
as Jordan Peterson says, you have to risk being offensive in order to think. And that's why we have a First Amendment. A lot of people these days seem to think there is a right to not be offended, and that's total bullshit. There is no such thing. You in fact have a duty to offend at certain times. Like Colton was saying, a doctor that won't tell you you have cancer is a shitty doctor. You gotta say the hard thing, and then recognize the problem and deal with the problem. And if you're not doing that, you are not virtuous. You are just a coward.